The white silenced the husky who heard the avalanche. What if the mountain warned you? But only your dog could hear it? High above the Arctic Circle, 12 researchers were stationed on a glacier older than recorded history. Their instruments tracked wind shear, seismic tremors, and ice density shifts down to the millimeter. The forecasts were clear. The sky was calm. The system showed nothing. Then a Siberian husky began howling at an empty ridge. Minutes later, the mountain fell. This is the story of the day the ice broke without warning, and the only alarm had fur and 4 legs. Chapter 1: The Frozen Outpost. Aurora Ridge Research Station stood anchored to a narrow shelf carved into the mountainside. Steel pylons drilled deep into permafrost held the structure above a valley of fractured ice and frozen wind. Beyond it stretched miles of untouched Arctic wilderness, silent, blinding, absolute. Inside, the station hummed with controlled warmth. Monitors glowed with satellite imagery, thermal readings, and ice core analysis charts. The 12-person team rotated shifts, logging glacial density data and mapping microfractures across the upper ridge. They believed they were studying gradual collapse, slow melt cycles measured in decades. Not minutes. Outside, tethered loosely near the equipment shed, stood Koda. A grey and white Siberian husky with glacier blue eyes and a thick winter coat layered like armor. His paws were broad and silent on packed snow. He had been rescued 3 years earlier after a commercial sled expedition failed during a blizzard. Since then, he had become unofficial station security, alerting staff to wandering polar bears and incoming storms hours before radar detected them. But today there was no storm. The sky was clear. Yet Koda did not relax. He stared at the ridgeline above the station, unblinking. Chapter 2: The Sound Beneath Silence. Avalanches are often imagined as sudden chaos, roaring thunder and explosive force. But their birth is quieter. It begins deep within the ice. Weeks of subtle warming had created meltwater channels beneath a compacted slab of ancient snow. Trapped water formed a lubricated layer, hollowing out structural support under thousands of tons of ice. Above that hollow, pressure accumulated. The glacier did not crack loudly. It hummed. A subsonic vibration pulsed through layers of ice and stone, too low in frequency for human hearing. The station's seismic monitors, calibrated for sharp tremors, recorded nothing unusual. But the vibration traveled efficiently through solid ice. Koda lifted his head slowly. His ears twitched. He felt it not only in sound, but through his paws pressed against the frozen ground. The mountain's heartbeat had changed. Chapter 3: The Warning No One Understood. Inside the station, Dr. Alina Markov led a presentation on projected ice thinning patterns. Charts displayed controlled projections extending 20 years into the future. The room felt safe, insulated from the cold outside. Then Koda howled. Not the long, mournful call of a sled dog. This was sharp. Repeated. Urgent. The sound cut through insulated walls and vibrated against steel beams. A technician glanced at the wind monitors, no gust activity. Another checked seismic feeds, still green. Koda began clawing at the outer door, barking toward the ridge. Dr. Markov stepped outside into crisp Arctic air. The world appeared unchanged. Snow fields glittered under pale sunlight. No visible cracks. No drifting plumes. Then she felt it. A faint tremor beneath her boots, not shaking, but vibrating. Koda sprinted sideways across the slope, then turned back, barking sharply as if demanding she follow. He was not running downhill. He was running laterally, away from the direct fall line. And that detail changed everything. Chapter 4: The Fracture Line. High above them, a hairline crack raced across the glacier surface like a bolt of frozen lightning. The sound arrived seconds later, a deep, splitting groan that echoed across the valley. Dr. Markov shouted into her radio, "Evacuate laterally. Move across the slope." Confusion erupted inside the station. Equipment was abandoned. Data screens flickered as boots pounded toward emergency exits. Then the slab released. A section of the glacier the size of a stadium detached and began to slide. Gravity seized it. Ice shattered into airborne powder. The slope transformed into a rushing wall of white. The avalanche accelerated with terrifying speed, swallowing rock outcrops, pulverizing snow layers, generating a shockwave of compressed air ahead of it. Koda ran ahead of the scientists, guiding them toward a natural granite protrusion that shielded part of the valley. Seconds later, the avalanche struck the station. Steel bent. Glass exploded outward. The lab vanished beneath a torrent of snow and ice. Chapter 5, Buried in White. The force of the avalanche roared past like a freight train made of winter. Snow blasted against the rock outcrop where the team had taken cover. Visibility dropped to 0. The world became white noise and suffocating cold. Dr. Markov pressed against stone, shielding her face as ice fragments tore through the air. Around her, the team held position, anchored to emergency lines. The avalanche lasted less than 30 seconds. It felt eternal. When silence returned, the valley had transformed. Where Aurora Ridge Station once stood was now a smooth, unbroken slope of compacted snow, as if the building had never existed. The team had moved just far enough sideways across the slope to escape the main burial zone. Koda stood ahead of them, snow dusting his fur, ears still alert. He had guided them precisely out of the avalanche's direct path. Chapter 6, The Aftermath. Rescue helicopters arrived hours later, alerted by emergency beacons activated during evacuation. From the air, the destruction looked surgical, a clean white scar slicing through the mountainside. Satellite analysis later confirmed the cause, a meltwater-lubricated slab destabilized by internal warming pockets. The fracture zone had been too localized for broader seismic networks to detect. The station's instruments had not failed. They had simply been designed for louder warnings. Avalanche experts later explained that animals often detect low-frequency vibrations through bone conduction and poor sensitivity, a sensory advantage humans lack. The team replayed bodycam footage of Koda's behavior. The timing was exact. He reacted before visible cracking. Before audible fracture. Before gravity took hold. Dr. Markov would later say in interviews, the mountain spoke. We just needed someone who could translate. Chapter 7, The Quiet Guardian. Weeks later, the surviving researchers gathered at a rebuilt lower-altitude facility. Funding had shifted toward integrating biobehavioral monitoring into avalanche detection research. They called the initiative Koda Protocol. Motion sensors would now pair with animal response studies in Arctic regions. A blend of instinct and technology, not one replacing the other. Koda lay beside Dr. Markov during the press conference announcing the program. He seemed uninterested in cameras. His gaze remained fixed on distant peaks. The mountain had returned to stillness. But everyone in that valley now understood something deeper. Forecasts measure patterns. Machines detect signals. But sometimes danger travels in frequencies older than instruments. And sometimes the first alarm system. Has a heartbeat. This story moved you, remember what it represents. Technology helps us measure the world. But instinct helps us survive it. If you believe animals sense danger in ways we're only beginning to understand, like this video to support more cinematic survival stories. Comment below. Have you ever seen a pet react before a storm or earthquake? Subscribe and turn on notifications for the next legend in the Sentinel series. Because sometimes the first alarm system has a heartbeat. I'll see you in the next story.